Welcome to the 7th episode of Countdown to RSAC. It is April 29th, precisely at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, where I have none other than George Kamide, who is the co-host, co-founder, co-awesomeness of Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks. Look, I think I got that right. Thank you very much.
That's right.
Which is an idea I wish I thought of. By golly, man,
thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, a little bit of kind of backstory, if anybody's with us right now, wanted just to, say like, I had this idea. Right? I realized, I'm going to be at RSA, and I've been to RSA. This will be my 5th time. And I always go and I never have any friends, like I just show up and like, I don't want to talk to that guy. He's a seller. Go away. I'm busy. I'm like, we're going to fix that this year. Right. So I pleaded, I made the case, did all the stuff to like, please, let's sponsor the Cybersecurity Marketing Society party. And my CEO was like, okay, fine. Just go away. Quit bugging me. We'll do it. So we made that happen. And ever since then I was like, okay, how do we make it work? And Gianna came back to me and she says, let's do it live. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And then she said, how about you host it? And I'm like, oh, okay. So then it turned into this thing like, oh, well, why just stop with 1? Let's just do 9. All right. So George, you were number 7, and Dani Woolf recommended that you be, that I get in contact with you. We weren't connected prior to this. We have never spoken beyond just a little 10 minutes of warm up that we had. And so I want to hear a story. I want to hear like all about the podcast, what you're doing with it, where we're going, and so on and so forth. Right. So let's start with that. So you're a podcaster and lay it on me. Tell me all about it. Tell me just whatever comes to mind, and I'll ask some questions as they kind of come up.
Yeah. So I was podcasting for, I think, 3 years previously with my employer. I just thought it was the right medium to use when you wanted to connect with people on a level that's deeper than, a trade show conversation, and a way to dig into some really gnarly topics, whether that was around career development or, threats of the day. At the time that I had started the first podcast, which was called First Watch, I was doing a lot of disinformation research. So that was hot at the time. And then I met my co-host, George Alcora, at an event at Black Hat. And we got to talking, and we had similar disdain for the artifice around these things between vendors and buyers. And I think it was either later that day or maybe it was the next day, I messaged him on WhatsApp. I was like, look, man, this thing writes itself. I'm George on the product side, you're George on the buying side. We both sort of have these gripes. I feel like that's the abstract. Let's just run with it. And he was game. So we started it shortly after that. And the title comes from, we wanted to approach the main issues that we saw with bare knuckles. So pretty brutally honest. We definitely curse a lot sometimes because, frustration can compound after some time. But we didn't want to admire the problem. So the second half of the show is brass tacks, right? So we ask all of our guests what are some very practical ways to address the things that they have on. And I would say that we initially started out as a podcast that was positioned to tackle the vendor-customer divide, as we called it. But as it turns out, after many more episodes in and people reaching out to us like, hey, I've had this issue. I have faced, a lot of harassment at conferences. I wish you guys would take that on. We really were listening to the audience. And I would say now the podcast, the aperture is much wider. I would say it's about the human side of the industry. It has encompassed everything from career development, whether it's for sales or for practitioners. It has also encompassed these social issues that overlap, like the unmitigated harassment that women face at conferences in particular. And just a lot of different areas that we grew organically out of that. We just kept trying to listen to the audience, see what they wanted to hear. And I have appreciated that, getting that feedback and being able to open up the conversation a little wider.
Well, let's talk about that. A couple of things in there for a minute. Obviously you hit this big issue on, with harassment at these conferences.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a brief overview of what that experience is, how, how we can identify it, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
otherwise not turn a
So
blind eye or deal with it in an appropriate way?
yeah, so I would say personally, I was very naive, right? I thought, hell, we're in the 21st century. This shouldn't be a problem. But I guess I was surprised to the degree and prevalence because last year after conference season, um, the stories that I heard that were just being told by female friends and colleagues was just gross. It was just like, why is this still happening? And it's a tricky situation for, I think, a lot of people because women already have to second guess a lot in the workplace.
Mhm.
And my friends would tell me, they do need to go to some of these networking events either because their company has sponsored it or because like that's where relationships are built. And to just say like you're not going to go to those things, one is just unfair. Like you should be able to go to these things without facing harassment. But also like if you didn't go, it might preclude you from some career opportunities, or if you're on the sales side, sales opportunities, which is your livelihood.
Mhm.
And so there was a lot of second guessing. There was a lot of talk about like, should I wear this? Can I wear just that the whole like mental acrobatics I just found alarmingly unnecessary and dumb.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that alcohol plays a part. I don't really understand the behavior myself. I mean, you're going to RSA, yes, you're going to see friends, but you are there in a business standpoint. It's not somebody's wedding, it's not a party, it's not the club.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can't draw those lines is quite embarrassing. But I wanted to put an end to it. I can't stop misogyny writ large. Not any one person can, but I did try to ask around. I was like, what are some things that could practically be done to help this? And so George and I, my co-host, put our heads together. We decided that like if we could just eliminate the 50-50 guesswork just a little bit. And I asked friends, I said, if you walked into a networking reception or something, and there was just a way to clearly identify like who you could count on, would that help? The answer was a resounding yes. And
Mm.
I said, like, what if I could mark those people and the rule was like you didn't even really have to talk with them. Like you could use me as a human shield. You can ask me to call you an Uber, whatever you need. If somebody is bothering you and offering you buy you drinks and you don't want it, like literally just come stand behind me and I will just be in the way. And I can do that. You don't have to make friends with me, whatever. So we came up with what we call the Ally Armband, and we'll be debuting this at RSA this year.
Mhm.
I am a soccer lover, and so I took my inspiration from European soccer, and we had these made. This is the Ally Armband brought to you
Nice.
by
Okay.
and Brass Tacks, bright yellow, so that you can
Okay.
see it across the room. And we will ask people to take what we call the Ally Armband Challenge, which is to just take a picture with it and post publicly on LinkedIn that you're going to wear it at offsite events during RSA and that it is something that people can recognize in you.
Mhm.
And I'm going to ask you to post it publicly so that there's accountability. There's no,
Yeah.
wolf in sheep's clothing situation here. So it's a small thing, but we're hoping that it picks up. And even if you were to walk in and see 30 people in a 200 person room wearing that,
Mhm.
one, I hope that it discourages the behavior, and two, again, takes down that 50-50 guesswork
Mhm.
just enough to make it
Okay.
tolerable.
Okay. Sign me up. I'll, put me on the list. I'm going to see you in person on Sunday, right? A
Yeah,
week
that's
from
great. Yep.
yesterday. Yeah. So we'll all be at the Cybersecurity Marketing Society party, May 5th, 5:30 to 7:30. And Peter Wheeler's in the house. Thank you. Peter Wheeler is a good friend of mine. Don't know if you know him, but
Nice.
he is the new head honcho, or just let's just call him honcho over there at the TAC IQ, doing some PLG work for them.
Nice.
We've got Nadine Hare in the house. Now she's down in Mexico City, so she will not be at the RSA, but she and I are good friends. And so I'm thank you, Nadine, for coming out here and hanging out. So Peter's not going to come to the he's not going to make it to the Cybersecurity Marketing Society party. So please, George, I am happy to be to wear that armband with, oh, there it is, Senior Director, PLG and Growth. My bad on the head honcho summary. But yeah, no, I'm as a dad of 2 daughters, as a husband of, for the last 30 plus years. There's no room for that kind of stuff. So happy to be a safe space for, for anybody who needs it, because it's, just as a middle-aged white guy, I'm not seeing it. Okay. I can't undo that, but I can.
And it is, I think, more insidious and more subtle than most people think. I mean, it can be as gross and awful and physical as you might imagine, and it has been for some of my friends. It can be as subtle as somebody just drunkenly trying to hand their room key to you as a woman. And it can be comments that like no one else can hear, right? I had a friend bump into somebody in a rather tight bar with her bag, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry I hit you with my bag." And his comment back to her was, "I'm sorry it wasn't your chest," which is just like, why? And it's just like, that's gross. Get away. And just, if you look around the bar and you suddenly have this panic that like, is everyone thinking that? Like, that's what I'm trying to relieve, is just that mental load is just agonizing for me to think of. And essentially I do most of what I do so that the workforce is safer for my daughter as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing that. And I will proudly wear the armband for 5 days, 5 straight days, and post about it and do all of that. So no worries whatsoever. And not just because you're my guest on the show, because I didn't know about it till just now.
That's right.
But it makes complete sense. That's been one of the fun things. I don't know if you find this on your podcast, but when you get little surprises, right? So I mean, I've had some legit surprises. Like, so Suzanne Gurman, who was with me middle of last week, she's making this connection to like they're doing a lot of work with veterans, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, get it. That makes total sense. And then AJ comes on last week, and he's like, you know what? I don't know about this 400,000 person gap in the cybersecurity industry, and he's just really asking about that, right? It's like, and now you're coming on and you're saying it's all this harassment going on, and okay, I believe you, but I go to RSA and I really truly go alone and have those stories, but I don't want to go alone, right? I want to be part of something bigger and have a bigger machine and in the best way. And so, hey, hook me up. I'll wear the armband. We're good to go. But let's dive into that a little bit. Like, the benefit of the podcast is that it gets recorded, right? And you can go back and you can edit it and make sure that it's, you're within, there's some quality control there, let's say. Let's talk about some surprises. Like, where have you been surprised in terms of like, oh, I thought this, or I didn't think that. This is like totally blown my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's like 5 years of podcasting.
Sorry, that was a totally surprise question. I did not prepare you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I think there have been a lot of surprises in terms of either the earnestness with which people are willing to engage in these conversations. So, for example, was speaking with one CISO now, but he was actually relating an experience when he was a deputy CISO or senior director. And he was just talking about how often vendors would turn to him and say, so what's your take? And literally this vendor has the org chart and he reports to the CISO, who is the woman sitting next to him. And we didn't prompt for that. We weren't looking for that, but it just came up. And then that became a thread that we wanted to pull on. Right. So, and because he was saying, like, once the trust is lost there, if they can't even give her, baseline respect, and like, you've done the homework just by laying bare their assumptions, those vendors might talk themselves out of a deal. We've also heard it from the seller side. I think the honesty with which a lot of sellers are trying to not be, the really pushy used car salesperson, but, they might approach something with good faith, and then, somebody will intentionally withhold a signature until just after the quarter, like, I don't
Mm.
know, on a lark or something, which is awful because, like it or not, like that quarter deadline matters, and that can be the difference between whether the seller is seen at the end of the year and the performance review is staying on or not. And I just think, like, these conversations, the big surprise is how humanizing they can become. It's very easy to stand back and kind of like scream from the bleachers, but if you just get down in the grit with every player in the ecosystem, whether it's engineers or buyers or sellers or marketers or product managers, I think that you just discover more commonalities. And I think that's what we're really trying to do is really expose those commonalities so we can get to a more humane
Okay.
process. Obviously, buyers need the tech stack, and sellers want to sell. And there's a better way to do that.
All right. That's it. I like that you're using the word seller, because I tend to just roll around out here with, I mean, that's what I am employed to do. Buy and fuse
Mhm.
is sell their solutions. Okay, got it. How do I go about that? Is my business. And so I want to understand from you a little bit about like what you're seeing effective sellers, how they're
Mhm.
positioning in 2024, heading into RSA. Like, what are they doing differently? Because what I'm continually inundated with is this idea that sellers are just cogs, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what the machine wants of them, is just to do this
Yes.
thing in a specific way, proscribed, and hit these activity KPIs, and then you either keep your job or you don't. Like you said, like I could get out of a job if I don't get this deal by the
Mhm.
end of the quarter, because it has a domino effect.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
where are we headed? Like, how is that
well,
getting
that's a
worse?
good question. Well, I think we're living through the middle of a pretty significant divergence. I would make the argument that we are in like a SaaS 3.0 era.
Okay.
The first being, I mean, if you can believe it, the first SaaS was Salesforce.com in 1999, which I think is hard to believe. And then we hit 2.0, which was, I feel like, roughly around 2012, just after, like, in this period of zero interest rates where there was a lot of free money going into a lot of startups. And the first activity was you hit your growth round, and it was like hire a bunch of salespeople, like literally more salespeople than engineers, and just knock down logos so that you can play the valuation game, right? I would make the argument that we've hit 3.0 after COVID. Two things happened. People went home. They don't want to be dialed on their phone. In cybersecurity, I don't think that we have spoken publicly or really dealt with the trauma that came with COVID. Like, being asked to lift and shift an entire workforce into the cloud was not easy, and it
Mhm.
was a lot. It was a lot to deal with. We burned a lot of people out. Um, and so I think the patience shrank. When you went into the office, you kind of expected your phone was going to ring and you might get a sales pitch or two. But like when it's your home phone and they're spoofing the local area code, and maybe it's the doctor or the kid's school, and you pick it up, like, people just don't have patience for that.
Mhm.
Then the interest rates went up and that free money disappeared. And so there are increasing eyes on things like customer churn, customer retention, cross sell, upsell versus, the whole net new logo stuff. So because of that, I think we are seeing either progressive sales leaders that sort of see this new mode, and those that sort of want to copy paste the 2017 to 2018 model in a post COVID world. And it's really not working.
Mhm.
And what I see is people putting a greater emphasis on visibility and credibility before they start asking for your dollars. And visibility is, I'm here, I'm in the community, I am attending B-sides, or I am, attending lunch and learns, or I'm just trying to network on a humane level. And then credibility, either, talking about things on LinkedIn, they're trying to address things with credibility and then win that trust. And that requires a lot of activity. Speaking of those activity KPIs, you sort of have to be in that mix all the time. And I'll give you an example. I have two very close friends of mine who are sellers, and they're also my co-founders with the nonprofit Mind Over Cyber. They hand each other leads all the time. And I say leads in air quotes because these are people that they have done business with for years. There are trusted relationships. And if they just hear like, hey, I also have a need for this, and they're like, well, I don't do that, but my friend Carlos does, like they have made significant deals through that just trusted friendship. And I'm sure you understand, Trevor, like
Mhm.
if a friend says, hey, this person is awesome, like that's going to cut that sales cycle real short, because that trust is what matters, right? Versus, and like, what is the cost per acquisition there? Like super low, but it takes a lot of activity and it takes constant being that way to
Mhm.
sort of get that machine, quote unquote, that machine rolling.
Yeah.
And, in a way that is materially beneficial and meaningful. And so I think for all the new startups out there, that ramp is going to be a little bit slower than maybe people have patience for. But I
Mhm.
would argue that the growth is far more sustainable. I have seen the movie many times where you get a bunch of money, hire a bunch of hot sellers from enterprise, and you're like, she sold to Apple. She's definitely going to help us. Yeah, but your Series A startup is like not going to get Apple on the phone. So like,
Mhm.
why are you trying to knock down enterprise deals as an initial startup? And so anyway, the lesson is it's going to take a little bit of time, but once it ramps up, you don't have to replace those sellers as often. I have seen that where you ramp up a whole bunch of sellers, and then like 2 quarters later is down by 2/3, and then you just kind of do it again, and you just keep burning capital trying to like find some sort of like magic sales team that's going to do it all for you. And I just don't think that works anymore.
Well, man, you have said just so many things that are music to my ears, right? Because I see a lot of, hey, let's hire for Rolodex, right? Or
Yes,
network.
yes, 100%, 100%.
And then what happens is the seller will in good faith work it and then exhaust it. And then
Yep.
what?
Yes.
And then they're like, oh, well, I only get paid on new business. So I'm done, right?
Mhm.
I'm out, right? And
Yep.
because those relationships are they don't grow on trees, right?
Yes, and my co-host would say, and has said multiple times, like he has bought from the same seller multiple times depending on where they go, because he trusts that they're going to do right by him. They're not going to like goose the margins, and they're not going to like throw in a bunch of pro serve things at the last second. Like, it's so much easier on him as a CISO to transact business than to start from scratch and try to go out and find vendors again, right?
yeah.
So as a seller, if you do it right, you also carry that power through to the next, to the next, to the next, because it's doubtful that you're going to be in the same place forever.
Man, okay. There's so much for just okay. So it's a couple of things, but I'm totally gonna forget. But all right, so the first one I want to talk about is I get pitch slapped all day, all the time, right?
Yeah.
And they're all about saying, don't you want to scale? Don't you want to scale? You want to
Mm.
scale? You want to scale yourself? And I'm like, bruh, no, like that's like I'm anti-scale, right? It's like, yeah, I want to do deals, of course. How
Yeah.
many do I need in a year, right? How many? Are you serious? Like I need 1,000? No, the org
Yeah.
maybe needs 1,000. I, as a seller on a big team, I don't need 1,000. I need some really great relationships that are actually going to work, right? And are
Right.
going to be productive and are going to be two-way, where we understand each other, our language is tight, and we, we're meeting, it's win-win.
Yeah. Breadth for
And
depth. Right.
yeah, I mean, so I just have all these issues around how do you scale sales? You don't. It's still one-to-one, right?
Yeah.
You can only work on this one thing. And
Yeah.
so that is yeah, man, I'm right there. And I feel like whew,
I think
okay.
you are seeing this. I think that I point to that divergence because I think we're in the middle of that sea change, which is always the hardest place to see it. But I have seen more investment in community initiatives. I've seen more investment in trying to build out user communities and build users into and customers into advocates. And instead of just like all the new logos, the worst thing that you can do is you sign the new logo and then you just like hand them off to the ProServe team and disappear, right? Like
Mm,
that's a relationship that you should be managing throughout the life cycle, because if there's any cross sell or upsell, it is only going to come through trust. It's not going to be like, oh, hey, 90 days to renewal. Let's talk. What more do you need? Right? Like no one wants to be treated that way. And
yeah.
so Yeah, it's gonna take some time, but I'm beginning to see more recognition of that.
Mhm. It's interesting though, because organizationally, the pressure is on the seller
Hmm.
to continue to push and prospect and fill the pipeline.
Yeah.
And there's less room, right? There's not as much room as I particularly would love to see and do and have to really do like what you just said, right? Accompany the customer along their whole journey, right? This SaaS
Mhm.
maybe 2.0, maybe 3.0 or 4.0 or whatever, some emerged version is really going to allow this uh, person, is we call them an AE for lack of a better title, to really be you know that single point of contact. Do you think that's viable, or is that,
I
or
don't know. I think that might depend on the software. I mean, some
okay.
software is easier to manage that one-to-one relationship, or if it does have the capability to have product-led growth, not all can, right? Especially if you have to ingest a lot of data, it's really hard to like spin that up as a PLG motion. You may have to rely more on, your technical sales engineer. But yes, you definitely need to get them to a place where they're feel that it's not just like hunt the signature, but it's like you have to manage that relationship because yes, they're in pipeline and something happens, budget changes, whatever, and you get that email like, let's kick it to next quarter. That's a bummer. But if you have consistently started to manage those relationships, I think you are consistently quote unquote filling the pipeline, but you have more coming in and you can manage that relationship and you manage that trust all the way up to your CRO also, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm listening and I'm integrating and I'm trying to do better myself, right? I want to pick on Peter here, who just dropped this. Are we selling bad behavior to sellers? I don't quite know what you mean, Peter. Um,
I
has
think I can take a stab at it. I would
okay.
say it depends. Yeah. I think it can be really bad behavior where it's like, hey, welcome to the team. Here's your outreach sales loft account. Get 5,000 emails a week or, whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is that old model that people are trying to copy paste onto this new market.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that always makes me laugh slash cry is that markets are dynamic. They change. And so to think that the market is exactly the same as it used to be and that you can just do the same thing over and over again, not a great idea. I would also say the bevy of new martech and selling tools that promise AI all the things, like you don't have to do any dials. You can just like AI your way through your top 500 accounts. That's not going to go over well, especially
Mhm.
as you have said, people buy one to one, people buy from people. If I get halfway through a call and I realize it's AI, like I'm never going to talk to you again. Like you have burned that trust. And here is the thing that I would say to any seller who is listening, and this is the defining characteristic of this 3.0 era. In 2.0, you had a bunch of people, they worked in offices, they occasionally saw one another. Going home and going full virtual was a forcing function for the buying community, whether it's CISOs, security engineers, whatever, to go online as well. And what that means is they all started to congregate into online groups because they couldn't go in person and talk to one another. But those groups, by virtue of being virtual, are much more expansive than they used to be, right? It's not like the same 10 people in the same metro area or even the same 100. We're talking Slack groups, societies, WhatsApp groups, hundreds deep and in a single region. So if you go in and you burn an account because you have, I don't know, emailed them 60 times in 3 months, or you have abused them using some kind of AI tool, your name is mud. Like
Mhm.
that one person can be like, I am never talking. I have heard CISOs say, I will not do business with this company out of principle because they're abusing my inbox. They're like, I don't care how good the email security is. I've told my entire team, take no calls from this. That rep who was told to do that or given those cadences or whatever has no idea that he is totally burned one, that account, and two, probably a lot of others in his territory. And so he's probably thinking, oh, they're not responding. I should just send more emails. Right. And so to
Because that
Peter's
worked
point,
5 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, to Peter's point, are we selling bad behaviors? Yes. But I would also say there are some out there kind of trying to preach the new gospel, for lack of a better metaphor, but like it, we're in the middle of the change, and so it's kind of hard to see that. But
Yeah.
I think that as more things become automated, I would encourage everyone to double down on what is human, because if you think about like every call center that we're going to answer is AI, like people are going to gravitate towards genuine experiences. Like that's
Mhm.
what's going to stand out, which I think is why, to your point about RSAC and stuff, I think we're seeing more traction around trade shows and in-person stuff, because, there's only but so much you get through the screen.
Yeah. Well, it's a couple things. The first is it came to me a couple of years ago, and I haven't shared this. I might have shared it with one person. As I began to see the inbox as a sacred space. Now that's a little
Yes.
bit loaded, but when I started to see like how is it really utilized, my clients will email with me immediately and highly responsively when
Mhm.
they're initiating it or we're conducting some kind of business that's actually live, right?
Yeah.
Bam, they're there. If I use it as a spam machine, it doesn't do anything, right? It just sits there. And
Correct.
probably actually the converse is true. It probably is harmful, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm just making it harder for them to use it as a tool to conduct business that they want to conduct. So,
Yes. So that is the third force, I would say, is we have high interest rates, or higher, that makes the money free. We have a changing buying behavior and market. And I think the third, to your point, is technology, right? So Google saying that it is going to limit emails to 5,000 uh, per month, and that includes help and support tickets and stuff like that. That actually puts a pretty tight clamp on some of those outreach tools, that kind of more or less abusing that API. Because if you get blocked at a domain level, dead in the water, right?
yeah,
Like they won't even get your emails about the signature. Like it's just like blocked. And yeah, and I think I have heard from CISOs increasingly blocking entire domains because they're like, I'm tired of it. And it's
yeah,
also like, if they don't answer, those people start hitting every direct report in their team. And they'll do shady things like, hey, I was talking to your CISO. No, I wasn't. And he
mhm,
told me to go here. And then your VP of SecOps, she told me to go there. And they're just trying to surround the whole team. It's broken trust. They're just going to stop the flow altogether.
yeah, that's okay. All right. Preaching to the choir here, buddy. All right. So I did want to say too, it's one of the reasons why I like LinkedIn Live,
Yeah.
right? Because in this moment, right, Peter's here or was, unless he left. Nadine is here, was here. You're here. I'm here. We're all four of us are here in person, like live in this moment,
Hmm.
right? So it creates this opportunity for accessibility, and I think there's this idea that it needs to be fully like attended, or have this big,
Hmm.
mass, a group of people simultaneously to make it, you know, to legitimize it. And I would argue, no, it really doesn't. If because what we've done is we've facilitated the opportunity to have a boundaried conversation about a specific thing in public, and that makes it safe, right? That you
Yeah.
can trust that I'm not going to go totally nuts and off the rails, because I'm on company time, and I mean, and I can trust that we're going to I'm going to kind of
Yeah.
hold to mostly, what we've already agreed on, and there's a purpose, like it's an intent here. But then
Yeah.
also saying like, oh, you talked about these communities, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so for me, the Cybersecurity Marketing Society was really exciting,
Yeah.
because even though I'm not a member, I can't be a member because of my job, but I can still support it, right? I can
Hmm.
still be aware of it, and I can still find ways to interface with it and say, oh, okay, this is a space that's been created for marketers to hang out and talk to each other. All right, how can I facilitate that? Because I want to be part of that
Yeah.
energy, right? I want to move that forward. So
And
as a
that's what I
seller,
mean when I say I have started to see some of that more progressive thinking. Like
Mhm.
a lot of conversation at the society's conference last December was about changing minds and managing up, right? Because a lot of founders may come from a technical background, not a sales or marketing background. They have a great
Mhm.
idea, they develop a minimum viable product, and then they just kind of do what the VCs tell them, like, here's the money, you need to go do this, this, and this. And the more experienced marketers have already seen the flame out from, trying to scale too quickly or whatever. And the
Yeah.
same goes for CROs. And so a lot of the conversations that I heard last December was about, like, basically this part of the industry trying to help change the paradigmatic thinking of the executive leadership in the industry.
Paradigmatic, man. That's a good word. I don't think I've ever used that word. I love that. I
Right.
gotta add that. Thank you. So let's dive in because we got about 10 minutes left, 9 minutes actually. So let's talk about the big event itself. Let's talk about like
Yep.
um, I kind of segued a little bit into Cybersecurity Marketing Society. What's been your role there? What's been your involvement? How have you supported its growth and evolution, and kind of where do you fit into that group?
Yeah, where do I fit in? Not sure. I presented there last December with Dani as part of our study of messaging at
Okay.
RSA.
Hmm.
And, you know, on at first blush, it might seem antagonistic, right? The report was looking at the use of buzzwords in RSA messaging, and we sort of cross-referenced the amount of words being used and then against what buyers said they wanted out of a conference. And there is a pretty big divide there.
Hmm.
But contrary to what I thought, the audience was very receptive. And many put their hands up to help us out with the second study this year. And again, there was a lot of questions about, like, we want to avoid using buzzwords. We would like to use clarity, but there's a pressure from above to just like slap AI into everything or next gen, whatever. How do you resist that? And there's also some like really tactically good questions around booth stuff, right? It's really expensive. It's a pretty heavy investment. How are you going to get the most out of that staff? I have some arguments that I would like to make around that. Um, but it was very telling when I was at RSA last year and I was doing the study and I was going around on the last day and everyone's exhausted and they kept trying to scan my badge. I would say, like, I'm not a buyer. I'm not your ICP. I have no budget. And they're like, I got to scan your badge anyway. And I'm like, but why are we standing here like doing the things we know don't work? And then, you know, what is it, 3 months down the line, you're going to be like, why didn't we get anything out of RSA? Like, so I
Hmm.
have found the society to be a good place for people to really talk about new ideas. I can't say every time that those new ideas make it out into the world, but I think it's important to have that space for people to talk among peers because they can, like we have done here, begin to strategize. Well, yeah, initially my CEO was hesitant to do this, but then I showed him the numbers around that, or my CRO said she wanted to change, the training model, and I was skeptical, but here's how it works. I mean, you have to have those spaces just to have those conversations because you don't get the new ideas never make it out into the world if it's like in a vacuum.
Yeah, yeah. Or they do, and they're half baked and not well
Yeah,
executed.
yeah, you gotta pressure test it with your friends and allies.
Understood. Understood. All right. So what are you good? So you're going to do another study this year at RSA, or what's your plan there for
Yeah,
using?
Danny and I will be doing another study. We'll be doing a bigger survey, just more data all around. We didn't get whole floor coverage last year because we were both exhausted. It was just two of us for 670 booths, and we didn't manage it. We have more volunteers this year
Oh, good.
to help
Okay.
with that data gathering and data analysis. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So then the point of that study is basically is to discover the buzzwordaholism, if you will.
That too, but also like there was even implications for basic booth design. Like
Mm.
contrary, I think, to what people think, there are buyers who are like, I want to have substantive conversations, but the way the booth is designed, it's super loud because they're shouting about whatever demo or sweepstakes or the one across the hall is. It's just like a huge sensory overload. I did want to call out. I thought Recorded Future had a really good booth design because they actually had a roof on there so it could get quiet in the space. But I don't know, there's lots of implications. Again, there's tons of money on that floor. So if you're going to spend it, best do it wisely.
Yeah, I mean, I had Bronwyn Hudson on the show
Mhm.
a bit ago, and so she's got a whole setup where they bring in all this kind of geeky, kind of nerdy old stuff,
Yep.
and you can kind of engage with that. And I've seen some of that. That's sort of fun. This kind of retro. Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting
Yeah.
designs, and there's themes too. I missed last year's event, but
Mhm.
um generally, I've been to enough to kind of get like, okay, I sort of know that like who's kind of doing what. Are you anticipating any kind of like any big emerged messaging, or anybody got something up their sleeve that you've heard about?
Yeah, well, RSA is a really good lagging indicator, right? Because if you
Okay.
think about last year, why wasn't AI everywhere? Well, by the time ChatGPT came out, like a lot of the booth designs are already in with Freeman, and they can't do anything about that. They can try to change the messaging that they have verbally, but they can't do anything about the design. So I fully and 100 expect to see AI all the things this year
Yeah.
because we have now lived through that heyday.
Hmm.
But we'll see. I think that's in its worst form. I think in its best form, we'll start to see smarter levels of booth staffing. Like you don't put all of your junior field marketing staff in the booth. You've got to have this mix. Yes, you need somebody from marketing. Yes, you need someone from sales to talk about pricing if anyone has those questions. And you definitely need a sales engineer there, not just to do the demo, but just to like answer the nuts and bolts questions.
Hmm.
And you have to have coordination between those teams. Like how do you vet those leads? I mean, I have personally winnowed a scan list from like 386 to like 93 once you start cutting out like the trick-or-treaters and the consultants and the students. And so I want to see better qualification in those questions instead of just like, let me scan your badge, here's a t-shirt, and let me do my 30-second pitch, right? I would rather
Yeah.
like, let's have the back and forth.
It's funny. I'm- so much good stuff here. Where I love to go and have the best conversations is back in the back, right? In the little
Yeah.
booth, because usually you've got
It's off to the side. It's actually
yeah,
like when you come down the escalators, you can either go straight into the South Hall or you
right.
can turn around. It's actually as you make a U-turn, it's usually like right alongside the escalators that people are
Yeah.
having like the quiet chat.
Yeah, the good stuff. Yeah. So Nadine, if you're still here, or anybody else who's still here, so RSA is in the Moscone Center, downtown San Francisco, or wherever down in my mind, it's in the middle of the
Yeah,
city. Okay, and it encompasses two massive halls of exhibit
massive.
space. Like and there, so they got the north and the south, and they got this middle zone
Yeah,
of low hanging booths, and there's all kinds
yeah.
of funny stuff that goes on. I once got this book, right? This dude had written a book, like a book. I wish I lost it somewhere, but I read it. And it was great because he totally nailed all the sort of
Oh, nice.
techie stuff, and it was super fun. So let's go full circle because we're almost out of time. We started with the podcast, bare knuckles and brass tacks, right? So that's your
Yep.
baby. You've been working on that for a long time. Are you going to be doing any work on that specifically while you're at the show? You kind of got a setup, portable thing, anything
Yeah,
like that?
for sure. My co-host George Alcora and I will be at the Mind Over Cyber event, and we will be recording. So that is a networking and mindfulness
Hmm.
workshop, and so
Yep.
we want to be recording really short interviews with people who are discussing challenges that they have faced to their mental well-being and tales of resistance. Because I think I want people to understand you're not alone, right? I think it's easy to say that, but once you start hearing how people have contended with things, it kind of opens up the possibility of talking about your own. And we'll also be on the floor. We will have a bunch of swag with us in tow, including discount codes to our new merch store. So last year, one of the great surprises was being surprised by listeners on the floor. I did not expect to be identified, but that was a welcome occurrence.
Rad. Okay, sweet. Well, we are at time. I want to say thank you so much for spending 45 minutes with me and with Peter and Nadine and whoever else was hanging or lurking around in the shadows.
Yeah.
So I will see you in person in less than a week at the big old Cybersecurity Marketing Society party. And I did not make the cut for the mindful workshop, gathering
Yep.
because I was too late. So I'll be at Phil's Coffee enjoying a mindful
A mindful moment with the macchiato.
Yeah, mindful consumption of their coffee. So, if you've got any parting words, we are at time, buddy. What do you anything you want to say, or anybody you want to call out?
No, it's been a blast, and thank you for having me. And if you're going out to RSA, pace yourself.
Well, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to do a little count up timer and say goodbye. Love to all. Have a great show if you're going to be at RSAC, and a great rest of the week. Happy Monday, everybody. Bye.
All right. See ya.